Does baseball look the same to you as it does to me? When we look at baseball, how much do we see? Well, the curveballs bend and the home runs fly. There's more to the game than meets the eye. To get the stats compiled and the stories filed, fans on the internet might get riled, but we can break it down on Effectively Wild.
Hello and welcome to episode 2349 of Effectively Wild, a baseball podcast from FanGraphs presented by our Patreon supporters. I am Ben Lindbergh of The Ringer, rejoined by Meg Rowley of FanGraphs. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
Also with us and also in the Atlanta area for All-Star Week is Eric Longenhagen, lead prospect analyst for FanGraphs. Hello, Eric.
Hello, how are you?
Still okay.
We are in Kylie's house.
Oh, yeah, well.
We are coming to you from Kylie McDaniel's abode.
If Kylie wants to crash the podcast, he's welcome to as well.
He's very busy.
Okay, well, so are we, I guess, because we have a lot to discuss. A lot has happened since we last podded. We had a Futures game. We had an All-Star game. We had a home run derby. We had a draft, which is, I guess, the primary reason Eric is here, to drop some draft knowledge on us. But we have to talk about some other news before we even get to that. Just so much to cover here. So I guess we can talk a little bit about the Derby first, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, the Derby was, it was kind of fun. It was, it's fun in person, I assume. I mean, I've been to past derbies. It's been quite a while for me, but I do enjoy the in-person Derby experience. And obviously, Cal hit lots of dingers, as he has done all year.
You know, it can be kind of variable. I'm going to do a thing that is very annoying, and I will admit that up front. But, so much of your experience of the Derby in person when you're there as a media member is contingent on, like, the particular Ox box setup. And so we got to witness Derby. We got to see some very long home runs, some very hard hit home runs. And we got to hear very little of it at all, which, when Pat McAfee was up was just fine. That was about as much audio as I really needed. The muted thumpings of a wrestling man and his sleeveless sidekick. But yeah, it was good. I think the Derby's a good show. I know that there's a lot of tinkering that everyone wants to do all the time. I'm open to tinkering. We should talk about the advisability of separating winners by less than an inch of home run distance. But I think it is easily one of the better sort of exhibition events that the league does. And that remained true even with no Pete Alonso, with no Aaron Judge, with no Ohtani. We got to see some terrific performances. And then, yes, Big Dumper emerged victorious, and I was delighted.
Yeah, I mean, the Ox box experience is its own thing, and you do feel like you're listening to the Derby through, like, a wall in a hotel room. Some of it was amazing to, like, have a Junior Caminero homer or two pelt the glass that made up the Ox box, even if, some of the seats there, the foul pole is, like, blocking your ability to, like, see the guy swing or whatever. But yeah, just, the recent prospects who I watched take BP in high school, who I watched take, BP on a backfield in Florida because Junior Caminero has, like, come this far, this fast. Looking just at O'Neal Cruz's body and the way that, like, he dwarfs literally everyone, and even to, like, a greater degree than he did when he was, like, a freaky 21-year-old kid. It was amazing to see Cal Raleigh switch hit home runs at the Derby. So, it is more of a feat of strength event for me than anything I care, about somebody winning. The joy, like, Cal Raleigh's definitely been doing the media car wash. I think the MLB had him on the program, to try to get the that stuff, like, kind of kickstarted. He's on Mina's show. He's on, McAfee. He's, like, sort of pressing the, ample flesh of, like, that is Cal Raleigh, and trying to get more comfortable. And I think that it has been good. I think him after the Derby, he's legitimately joyful. Like, I think you winning a wiffle ball home run derby in your backyard and there being home video of it that can be played after you win like a big league home run derby is like a really special thing. I can't imagine what that's like in that moment to sort of have your life not flashing before your eyes, just like presented in front of you while you're, on national TV. That would totally weird me out and probably make me really emotional. But yeah, it was mostly a really good time. I had a fried green tomato slider on a biscuit with like a lot of pimento cheese, and that was good. And I accidentally spilled some of that pimento cheese on the seat next to me in the aux box. So sorry to those dudes from Diario Exclusiva. I tried to do my best to get that up before you guys sat down. But that like basically encompassed my Derby experience, and like sweating profusely through my scout fit, which was a theme here this week. Just like hairy guy sweats through all his clothes. Mm-hmm. That's like sort of the long and short of everything that wasn't me like staring at a screen doing draft and futures game stuff.
Yeah, on the broadcast, I find it to be a bit frenetic, McAfee or no McAfee, just because under the current format, we've all debated so many home run derby formats and tried so many home run derby formats. I always forget what the format actually is until the thing starts, if not after that. And there's just always someone suggesting some sort of tweak, and often it's just going back to what we had. And when we had that, no one was happy with that. So I don't know if there is a perfect derby format that would please everyone. But generally speaking, I do find it to be a bit too fast-paced, just because I do like to see where the home runs land and just be able to track the trajectory. It seems like that's half the fun of it. It's just seeing these gigantic taters, and now one barely lands or doesn't even land before the next swing is happening, and you've got split screen, and you've got various stats all over the place, and it's just a little tough to track. Then again, in the other formats where there was a bit more time to breathe and admire, those things would just last forever and would just wear you down. So I appreciate the fast pace too. And so maybe there's a happy medium, or maybe this is the happy medium. Mostly I enjoy it. And yeah, it was weird. Baseball's a game of inches. The Derby is a game of inch, I guess, 1 inch.
Not even.
Yeah. So that was unusual, unexpected. And, guys get gassed by the end of it. It's like in the early derbies, you look at the totals of the home runs that they hit back then, and it was single digits. I mean, some guys didn't go deep at all. It was kind of boring by comparison. But now players are hitting so many home runs that they're just sweaty. They're just getting fatigued by the end of it. So I don't know if there's a perfect derby format, and maybe this is just the compromise that no one is perfectly happy about, but pleases the most people, or at least displeases the most people least, potentially. It was, there were good moments. There was like Cal getting plunked by his dad, the batting practice pitcher. There was a home run robbery by just a kid in the field, but it didn't count, which was kind of disappointing. I mean, I guess it's not the home run robbery derby, though that is something people suggest and seem to desire. Yes. And so I kind of wanted to just it should count. Like that was effort. That was talent. And yet we're not actually there to watch the fielders try to take the home runs away. But that was fun. And then there was O'Neill doing what you want O'Neill to do, which is, tie the non-Coors record with a 513-foot home run. And in a way, it's like whoever hits the longest one wins the Derby on some level. And Cruz kind of won it right there, but not really. So, yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's kind of unusual in that the Derby, which I feel like lately has been the highlight of All-Star Week. Seems like people are more psyched for the Derby than for the All-Star game. Yeah. But this year, the Home Run Derby got upstaged by the Home Run Derby at the end of the All-Star game.
Right.
Which was weird. But we kind of got double the Derby, and the actual Derby was almost overshadowed by what happened at the end of the All-Star game.
I want to talk about the swing off, but I will just say the range of emotions I went through on behalf of the kid who robbed the home run. We were watching, and we were both so concerned that I was like, if it comes to I wasn't tracking that they had actually awarded Caminero a home run for it, because you're watching Vlad just be despondent and keeps gesturing to the outfield and like, are they going to count it? And I was like, if he loses by 1 home run because of that kid's robbery, like, is this kid gonna get like pilloried on the internet? Is this kid going to face some sort of crazy consequence the next day? What is today? Today is Wednesday? Yesterday? When are we? Anyway, we had our BBWA meeting, and part of that is an availability from Rob Manfred, and he joked that he has already instructed league officials to tell the Shaggers next year, no home run robberies attempted. And I gotta say, like, just hit it farther then. Like, come on, this seems like, I don't want to accuse Junior Caminero of having a skill issue because clearly quite skilled, but also like, you just gotta, don't put it in a robbable spot. But I was very worried for that kid, but it ended up being just fine, obviously.
They already tell them not to rob it. You could see the other kids. You could see the other kids around as soon as he did it, being like, oh, shouldn't have done that. I would be tempted to try, even if I had been told
Not to.
But the thing my mind went to immediately was there an over-under Junior Caminero like home runs that was just impacted by this kid? And are the lunatics who bet on that the ones who are more likely to be a problem for this young fellow who we're showing 3, 4, 5 times?
Right. I'm like, stop showing his face
on the broadcast. Because now, you know, it's just like, oh, hey, Gemini, who's this person?
Right.
Like us walking into the ballpark, my mug, even like, you know, as variable as my beard length can be, the crazy identifying camera that they have on us as we're walking into the ballpark, and it was sort of like the same one that we walk into like Disneyland or whatever. It's taking a picture of your face and it tells the usher letting you in like who you are. And mine was like taking my picture from outside the thing anyway. But yeah, I think the home run robbery idea is interesting. Like, I think if Byron Buxton wants to go shag, he should be able to rob the other guys if he can. And that's just true of anybody. And like, part of me really wants to see Kyle Schwarber out there trying to do that, or you know, whoever the you know, Humpty Dumpty-ish guy of that year's Derby would be. Like Pete Alonso out there trying to rob people.
Pete
would,
might,
I think, be funny.
Yeah, I was going to say,
definitely would.
I don't think anyone else would actually do that. I don't think they would be sufficiently motivated to do that, other than Pete. I think Pete, if he were in the Derby, would commit to the bit. But yeah, I enjoyed that at least. And you know, it's just a little too long for me because it's a lot of swings and homers, and there's just not that much variety. And the first round takes like an hour and a half or something. You know, it's just that's why maybe the swing off was comparatively so refreshing. It was short and sweet, you know? I'm not saying I want the Derby to be that short, but a little shorter. It feels like the current format is kind of an amalgamation of everything that has been tried over the years, just like various Derby formats. Like you get a certain number of pitches, or there's a clock, or you have the head-to-head brackets, or you get a certain number of swings and outs, and they've just kind of jumbled it all together. And maybe it's the best of all worlds. I don't know, potentially, but it's still quite long. And that's why I think you still constantly hear the calls for skills competitions where the Derby would just be one of many and there'd be more variety. And look, we've been doing this podcast for 13 years and people have been demanding that for longer than that. So we have answered this question. We've discussed it ad nauseum, I think, in the past. Every possible skills competition, you know, place hitting, bunting, relay throwing, sprinting, home run robbing, whatever it is. And, you know, the international all-star games that incorporate some of that stuff. I'm into it. I'd be happy to have that, but it just doesn't seem like there's much will to do it. A lot of the competitions that are proposed have some degree of injury risk more than just home run derby. Even if it's just running or throwing hard, you know, there's just a little bit more of an injury risk than trying to hit home runs off of batting practice pitches, basically. Right. And so it just doesn't seem like the will is there for it to happen, or that like things have bottomed out far enough in terms of all-star game interest, because the MLB all-star game relative to the NBA all-star game, the NFL all-star game, it's still relatively like the regular sport and still generates some interest. and is not quite as lost a cause as those other sports equivalents. Sure. And so maybe things have to get desperate in order for, a real shakeup to happen. And maybe that's what the swing off spurs. Maybe that prompts further change.
Maybe. I do think it's interesting that it does feel as though the other sports all-star festivities, at least like these types of things, the dunk contest and the three-point shooting contest and like some of the NHL skills stuff. Although the NHL skills stuff I think is a lot of fun to watch, and it seems like people love watching it. But like the Pro Bowl and stuff like that, and they've tried to, when we were kids and they had some of these like skills competitions that we're talking about now where the guys would like race each other, or they would do like bench press competition. Rest in peace, Larry Allen. And that stuff for, reasons that everyone listening to this knows to be obvious. Like once someone blows their ACL playing flag football with, retired players and celebrities and stuff, like that's the end of that. And it was. And so some of that stuff, yeah, but like I'd love an infield defense competition that like Rafael Furcal is on it's like judge like the dunk contest or Iron Chef, where it's like Rafael Furcal and Alton Brown and like the guys from Outcast are, like local people plus like those who would know, Edgar Renteria and, that's who I want to be like, oh, hey, Jose Iglesias won the skills competition this year, like infield defense stuff. But the swing off was great. I thought it created an interesting dynamic where it is home run derby like, but it is not just for you anymore. Right. It's for the whole squad. And I think when Rooker told, I guess it was Passan, like, hey, I'm nervous. Or no, I guess it was Verducci, right? And he did look more nervous than during the Derby. And I think it's because, like, all right, now everyone is out of the dugout and rooting for you in a way that is totally different than it was yesterday, where it was just you for you within yourself. The dynamics of it are totally different. And almost like an NHL shootout where you have to go, X home runs per swing. Like, I thought that created a cool sort of tension that I really liked. And I also think that they should have, the only thing about it, my note is change how you can pick who gets the swing. No offense to Jonathan Aranda, who definitely deserved to be an all-star. That poor guy's, service time has been manipulated to death. He should have been a big leaguer for the last 3 years, probably. He's really good, but like, I don't want him up there for that. And I know some of the reasons make sense. Like some of the dudes are showered and changed, like Tarek Skubal was.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can't have them come back out to do it. But like, I feel like the managers or the squad or someone should vote on who you send out there to do it, because it is kind of, the young guys like who winning the All-Star game makes more of a difference. Like they should get to pick who goes out there.
I know you two were otherwise occupied for part of the game itself, and you didn't miss that much in the early innings because it was fairly lopsided, and there were moments, and Jacob Mizrowski came out and did what everyone thought he would do, just throw the ball really hard and throw a 98-mile-per-hour slider. That's why he was there, so he delivered. But
that was nice. They cut to the dugout right after that.
Yes, exactly. And you two, I guess, being there in person, you missed the broadcast aspects of the in-game live player interviews. And even though we're anti that generally on this podcast, I'm not anti that when it comes to the All-Star game.
Right.
But this specific implementation of it was not great because Cal was not into it. And so Tarek Skubal and Cal being mic'd up, it was pretty awkward. And it was like short answers and just nothing revealing whatsoever. Like, give Cal all the shine. Absolutely. This is the season of Cal. I'm glad he won the Derby and it's fitting at everything. But I feel like you have to curate it to make sure that the right players are doing it, who really want to do it, are in a position to be able to. Like, it's tough if you're pitching or catching. I mean, I know that there have been some instances of that where it's worked pretty well, I guess, during All-Star games. I'm fine with that. All-Star games, spring training, whatever, exhibition games, it's totally the time to do it, I think. But also, like you have to have players who are really playing along with it, I think. And that was not the greatest. So if you could actually hear in real time, like pitchers and catchers talking you through their strategy or something somehow without being overheard by the batter, then that sounds like it would be cool. In theory, it does, but in practice, it's not. Like when Alek Manoah did it, it was pretty fun. I thought
it was great.
He was into it, but he's not an all-star anymore. So
the challenge during a regular season game is that the star players you want to hear from are on the field. Mm-hmm. And in the all-star game, you can talk to someone who's just chilling in the dugout, and you still get to talk to Francisco Lindor or whoever for an inning. And they don't have to be distracted by what it is they're doing.
Yes.
So much of the draft stuff, when you see any of these players or are writing about any of these players, the context is important. And I think that's true for this too. Like these guys it's the All-Star game is a big stage even for them. And some of them, it's more natural to be loose and charismatic. And for some of them, it's not, like to be on TV or to be in an all-star game for the first time. And some of their heroes are, Clayton Kershaw's playing catch with them or whatever it is. So, I think that there's a simple fix to that. And it's just like, talk to these guys when they're not doing anything else but talking to you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the all-star game.
Right. I mean, you could always talk to a starting pitcher who's not pitching that day or something like that, even in a regular season game. But in an all-star game, it's all stars. So you can just have your pick. And also, like, even if the All-Star game doesn't have the same intrigue that it once did, every matchup is pretty compelling. Even the least interesting matchup in the All-Star game, it's still between pretty good players. And so it's not like it is during a regular season game where there's just, a lot of stuff that's not super interesting happening. Yeah. In an All-Star game, everything is fairly interesting. And so it's just sort of a distraction from that. I did think one nice thing about the game was that because some of the best players were not starters, like they didn't win the fan vote or whatever, there were really good players there at the end of the game, which is often not the case these days.
Yes.
So people look back and they lament the days when, Willie Mays or Mickey Mantle or whoever would be in there at the end of the game, and it was just the starters stayed in, and now it's not. But in this case, you had like Javi Baez in the starting lineup and Caminero and Ryan O'Hearn and Jacob Wilson. And, I'm not saying these guys weren't deserving all-stars, but they weren't the biggest stars. And because of that, this time you had like Byron Buxton coming in late. You had Bobby Witt Jr. in big moments late in the game.
Yeah.
You had, like Jazz Chisholm, I guess. You had Stephen Kwan with an exciting at-bat against Edwin Diaz. And that's good. And I'm not saying everyone has to stay in the whole game, but it worked out well this time. And people talk about a re-entry rule for the All-Star game, just like bring guys back in at the end if it's close or high stakes or something. And it's complicated because, as you said, people just leave. Or they're just not in a mindset to be playing anymore. But I thought that made things more compelling. Plus the fact that a comeback was happening, which I guess is related to this. And so because of that, you end up with the swing off. And the great thing was, like, nobody was prepared for this.
Which is so funny because it was in the CBA. Like, this was, we just haven't had occasion to use it until now. But yeah, this wasn't just, if it had been an invention of this All-Star game, like, I don't think that would have made it any less cool. But yeah, this is a provision that's in the most recent collective bargaining agreement as a way of addressing the end of, because they don't want it to end on a tie. And they definitely don't want to play extras. So what do? You do a swing off.
Yeah, and it's just funny that no one was really aware of this. And even on the broadcast, it's like they weren't talking about it. I don't know if
Right.
they knew. It's like they wanted to keep it a secret or something.
Yeah.
And then the players themselves, I saw a report that the players didn't know until there were like 2 outs in the ninth or something. And then at least a lot of the players just weren't aware that this was how the game was going to end. And so that was kind of fun just to like have this sort of sprung on everyone. And yeah, as you said, Eric, like the selection of the hitters. So I guess the way it works is that you designate the swing off guys before the game.
Oh.
There was just one replacement who had to fill in, I think, for Eugenio Suarez because Suarez got hit by a pitch. And so then there was an alternate. I forget which of the swingers it was, but there was an alternate replacement for Suarez. But other than that, it was Kyle Stowers was the alternate.
Oh, okay. That explains that. We were wondering.
Yeah.
We're like, how did Stowers end up drawing this straw?
Yeah, because Schwarber, Alonso, okay, that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
Brett Rooker, legitimate
Yeah,
pick. But yeah,
totally.
to have it end on Jonathan Aranda is like not the number one guy you would want in that situation swinging off.
We did have drama. That one almost snuck out.
It did.
It was off the wall, right? But yeah, that was really cool. Now, would it have been cooler, I guess, if you had like Judge and Shohei going up there in that spot?
Sure.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think Passan in his piece for ESPN, he said that like half the players were gone. Like they weren't just showered and changed. They had left the ballpark, according to Passan, which I guess tells you something about, the importance that players place on the All-Star game these days, that they're not even sticking around for the end of it.
Or just their own sleep. Like some of it is, you say Kikuchi sleeps how much?
Right.
Yes.
That's weird.
Yeah. And, it's, as you said, it's hot in Atlanta. And they want to get out of there and, use the off day that comes after and maybe take a trip or something. I don't fault them, but that's why it was not the number one guys you would want up there and why it would probably be a tough sell to implement that, to just say you can't leave, you have to stay in uniform until the last second. Then you'll probably get even more guys begging out of the game. So, but, as it was, like Schwarber, 3 swings, 3 bombs, just like awesome. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Schwarber, he's had a lot of big moments in his career. Like
he sure has.
He rises to the occasion. A lot of memorable highlights in his career. So, he's one of the best home run hitters in baseball, certainly.
Yeah.
He didn't even swing at a good pitch at the end.
Right, yeah.
He was just like, whatever.
I'm going to hit it. I'm going to hit it.
Go get it.
He might be at the top of a leaderboard that I am making up in precisely this moment, which is like if you were an alien and you came to Earth and the way that you understood baseball was to watch highlights from jewel events, so the All-Star game, postseason, I think you would have a completely warped perspective on how important to the history of this era of baseball Kyle Schwarber is. He might be at the top of my like weird alien interprets baseball history leaderboard because you're right. He's just like he has hit big home runs in big moments, and he's Schwarber's a good hitter. There have been times where he's been a less good one. There have been times where he's been a bad outfielder as a service to his team. But like I think that he would completely confound an alien civilization trying to make sense of our bat-to-ball sports.
Yeah. I guess you could say that he just has exerted an outsized influence on baseball history. It's not even like he has had a big impact, more so than, I guess, his overall on-field value, which is in itself quite considerable. Like he's a really good player, but also...
for sure.
To me, he is... I mean, I've had my random, deeply important personal stuff that he has just sort of intersected with. Like, even when he was in college, I went to Penn State to see him with my, like, then brother-in-law. Like, we took a guy's trip to go see Kyle Schwarber. And it was graduation weekend at Penn State, and so it was insane. Like, we didn't know that was the case, and, like, I was there to see Kyle Schwarber. Mm-hmm. And then when he was returning from injury while the Cubs were on their World Series run, he was getting tuned up in the fall league because there was no other baseball going on. And so there's this just enormously important thing happening amidst all of the fall league normalcy. And the games were packed to see this guy. And the Cubs, I think, won the NLCS, or at least like they advanced somehow while he was like playing in a fall league game, and he left the fall league game to like champagne showered the Cubs employees who were there, like in the facility. And all, this was like just fun, random, important stuff. And he might be the all-time, like, WAR underrates this guy. Like, if you want to nitpick WAR accurately telling you baseball talent, this is one of the guys. And I think Luis Arias is the other guy, just like at the front of my mind, where like it's not properly capturing how skilled they are and how their skill plays against any individual person. It doesn't matter who else. Like the other guys who produce like them from a WAR standpoint are often just like okay players who Aroldis Chapman will overwhelm and Jose Alvarado will overwhelm those guys. But like Luis Arias and Kyle Schwarber, no, like they can do the thing they do against anybody. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I guess skill doesn't always correlate perfectly to value as we measure it. But Meg and I had that conversation, I think, about Schwarber. Like, what if he hits 500 bombs? Like, is he going to get in the Hall of Fame someday? And even if he doesn't have the WAR or the jaws to support it, and if he does, and if it's like a committee vote down the road, if the writers don't vote him in, then it would probably be based on the fact that he had these moments,
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
Hey, All-Star Game MVP without actually getting a hit in the game proper, I guess.
Yeah.
Technically, he didn't get a hit in the game. Technically,
he was in there as like batter 3 or whatever, right? Like if you look at the box score from last night, it is so confused. The box score didn't know about the CBA either. They're like, how do we account for these guys? I do not know what to do.
Yeah, technically it's a 6-6 game. I mean, and yet the National League wins it. So yeah, it was weird. But yeah, there were 24 pitchers used or something. So I'm totally fine with ending an exhibition, an All-Star game this way. Of course, I am afraid, given the great response to this. I've seen so many people, players and managers included, have said, like, I'm sure you're going to be hearing about this as a regular season solution too. And mostly disapproving of that and saying, I wouldn't support it, or I don't think we're going to get it. But I'm afraid now because of the precedent of the zombie runner. And just, I was very much like, okay, fine, in the minor leagues, I get it. It makes sense. It doesn't really matter that much who wins or loses down there. And then, okay, COVID, I guess, fine, sure. And then, it just, you open the door a crack and suddenly we're stuck with the zombie runner forever. I guess if I had to choose, I'd still prefer zombie runner to swing off in every regular season game that's a tie after 9 or however many innings. I would, number one, prefer just do what we used to do, which is play until there's a winner. Number 2, ties. I'm okay with ties. And number 3, well, I don't like any of the number 3 options, I guess. But, like the thing that was fun about the swing off is that it was something we didn't see coming and we've never seen before. And if you had this be routine, then it would stink. Like, you're not going to get all-star, the best hitters, I guess. Well, I don't know. I guess if you're going to have the best hitters available, if it's a regular season game, and you can probably come up with 3 who are all-star caliber on just about any team. But yeah, the charm would wear off, and I don't want a baseball game to be decided by one sliver of what constitutes the playing of baseball, which is hitting home runs. That's an important part of it, obviously. Sure. But yeah, even if you had like, and how would you even handle? Would it be like off pitching machines? Would you have the opposing team pitch? That's the weird thing when the stakes are actually there. The competition matters.
You kind of can't do it because of that.
Right.
Yeah. You have like some traject machine out there and it's just like a lot of whiffs and eventually you hit a home run, but like 3%
if I want to really be slippery slope guy, then it's like, well, when Paul Skeens gets hurt, can I use the traject machine to recreate him on my roster?
Skeens.
Yeah, we have answered a clone question about Skeens, but yeah, pitching
people are
machines.
obsessed with that clone question, Ben. My goodness.
Because people talked about like bringing in pitching machines in the home run derby because there is always that aspect, which wasn't that bad this year, but has frustrated me in many years, which is just either the batting practice pitcher is wild or they do not understand the urgency of the timer
Right.
and they're taking their time. And ultimately, it becomes as much about the batting practice pitcher's performance
Yes.
as the home run hitter, which is weird and backward. Like it's
not the point.
Yeah, it's fun that you can have your dad throw to you or your old coach or whoever, your buddy. I like that aspect of things. It's kind of informal and emphasizes the family bonds and everything, which is one of the nice things about the Derby and the All-Star games.
Yeah.
Like everyone's got their families and their kids, and it's memorable for those kids and everything.
Yeah.
Especially when you have so many kids of big leaguers who are now themselves big leaguers, and
Yeah.
there's the whole generational thing of I remember being here when I was a kid, and now I have my kids there. There's a lot of nepotism in pro sports these days because of the expense of amateur sports and all the other historical advantages that you have. But that is charming and heartwarming. But yeah, I would hate to see this become a regular thing in anything other than an exhibition. And I'm just worried because of maybe it's an unrealistic fear, but I've been burned before. And so I'm just, when MLB gets a win and suddenly people are talking about the All-Star game and, ooh, this was so cool. It's hard to, not have that be a Pandora's box or a slippery slope.
I get wanting to solve your problem, any problem you have of this sort. And the problem in this case is the game is taking too long and we're wearing out everyone's pitching staff. To solve the problem with the thing that is entertaining is the smart approach to take. And definitely the decision to swing off in this scenario is way better than like people going over to Bud Selig and being like, what do we do? And then him just going like, well, I know Freddie Garcia has been warming up, but like it's a tie. But in this case, I like with soccer shootouts, the way you're scoring is so much different than the way you have to go about trying to score during a game that it is offensive to my sense if it doesn't pass the smell test. And the zombie runner thing, I'm with you. Like I've become more open to changes as a result of what I think are positive impacts of the changes that they have made. I personally think the zombie runner should be a first base thing in the 10th and maybe a second base thing in the 11th. I think it would be cool if you got to pick the runner every inning so that if you have Gerard Dyson on your roster, he's your runner every extra inning. And then the thing that is injected in that is fun is, well, guess what? He's going to run. And so you have that piece of it that's like added into the fold rather than just like scoring period, when the zombie runner is on second base. So I guess it would be a 28 days later zombie runner if it's always Gerard Dyson and he's running. But yeah, I think the swing off thing would be a problem. What did you think of the challenge system, Ben?
I thought it was cool. I mean, we've been pretty pro. Meg has convinced me that it's good. And I thought with it being on the board and the stakes and the presentation of it all, I think it was savvy of MLB, I guess, to get it into this high-profile game just to get everyone even more used to the idea than they were in spring training and see it in a high-profile spot just to normalize it further before presumably implementing it next season. And it led to some suspense and some kind of collective oohs and ahs, and that was pretty fun.
The thing
I think it's great.
They should anticipate is strike three to Stowers toward the end. It looked like an obvious strike with the K zone, the broadcast's K zone.
Yes, right.
Like the entire ball was in the zone. And then he challenged it and it had just like nipped the zone per Hawkeye. Yeah. And that has to be the same.
Yeah, I think they have talked about just doing away with the K zone if we get
just another
system,
good
which
reason
is another.
Because I hate the K zone. I hate having it up there.
So overall, good All-Star week, good events, and the Aaron tribute was nice, obviously sanitized, and MLB has been criticized for cutting off the end of the Vin Scully call that made it clear that he was marveling at the fact that a black man in the South had just hit that home run and broken Babe Ruth's record, and they conspicuously did not play that part of the call. So it was very, calculated not to offend anyone, as was all the messaging around the game actually being where it was after having been moved years earlier and nothing really changing about the conditions on the ground otherwise. And, Dave Roberts kind of danced around a question about that, et cetera. So they wanted to keep the focus off of anything that could possibly lead to any backlash or offend anyone and just make it the marquee jewel event that they want it to be. And they were fairly successful at that. I did want to point out, Meg, I saw a story about Cal that taught me something about him that I did not know, which is that Cal Rowley may have invented Beef Boy.
What?
Possibly before we did, or
Oh yeah, because he was called that in the minors at times, right?
Yeah. So this was a story for NBC Sports or NBC News about his minor league career. He was at Modesto. This was 2019, and it says at 6'2" and pushing 230 pounds, Rowley was among the roster's bigger players, and he embraced his frame by helping form a club he nicknamed the Beef Boy.
Oh, my God.
Rowley's parents, who owned a screen printing business in his North Carolina hometown, had sent T-shirts with the outline of a cow and the words 100% pure beef, no added steroids or fillers. Rowley had also written a Beef Boy song with lyrics to the tune of Dobie Gray's Drift Away.
My God.
The qualifier to be a Beef Boy was that you had to be over like 225, 230, and you had to hit tanks. So
that's delightful.
Yeah, I don't think I was aware of this. The Big Dumper has so supplanted Beef Boy,
right? Yeah,
the legend of Cal that I guess he beat us to Beef Boy, or I forget exactly when we started saying that, but
I can't recall.
Yeah,
it's been so many pods, man. We've just had so many.
Yeah.
That's funny. I mean, look, I appreciate that there is, as is true for many players, and you're reminded of it when you're in close physical proximity to them, like you are at an event like this, where you're just like, these are some big guys, They are tall, they are muscular, they're the kinds of folks who, when they're in street clothes and you see them from behind, you're like, just look at the shoulders, that guy has to be a professional athlete. And so I appreciate that there is a general sort of professional athlete largeness to Cal, but I do think that we have settled on the most notable largeness, as it were. With him, it's really about the dumper, Ben. He's an ass man, and I don't know that I can recall a time recently. We were talking about this with various folks over the course of the week, like the national fixation on Cal's hinder. Can't recall a time recently that we've been talking about a grown man's ass so freely as a culture, as a community.
Right. Yeah. And the culture has gotten friendlier toward large posteriors just in general, I would say.
Correct.
And so its moment has arrived. Like there might have been a time where this would have been seen as derogatory, and now it's really celebratory. It's, I guess it's objectification to some extent, but he's clearly come around on it and is fine with it. So and it's funny, Sam put out a controversial Blue Sky post this week that he questioned whether the Big Dumper is actually that big. He said it's his most contrarian take, that he doesn't think it's that big.
He thinks it's just a normal sized dumper.
I don't know if he thinks it's like average, but just
average is less judgment is a better word, because I don't mean like it's abnormal. I have no information that would suggest that there's anything weird about the dumper. Simply that it is larger than average.
He did phrase it that way. He said, "My most contrarian take is that Cal Rowley's butt is normal," and I assume what he means by that is like not disproportionate, not overly large. And I'm with him to an extent. I think it's a big dumper, but I think that if his entire nickname is that, it's not quite as big as I would think if his whole public identity is based around it. It's like,
I don't know, man.
If I didn't know his nickname, I'm not sure that I would do a double take and be like, whoa, get a load of that big dumper. I don't know that because, compared to other catchers too, it's like Anthony Recker, that guy had a big butt. That guy, huge butt, like bigger. And I guess maybe it was more of a Ned Flanders in The Simpsons kind of butt than Cal has. I also think it's partly that Cal does not wear tight pants.
Right.
possibly because he wants to avoid accentuating the dumper, or maybe he just couldn't. But like, if he were in Spencer Strider, Walker Buehler pants, like,
I don't think you could crouch in those pants. I think they'd split right in half.
Yeah, so maybe if he were wearing that style of pant, then the dumper would be clearer. But it's true. Like, when I see it, sometimes I'm not like, whoa, it's like, that guy had a BBL or something. No, it's it's big. I'm not saying it's a misnomer. It's just like, like the big unit, which obviously,
I just want everyone to take a moment to appreciate that Ben is the one saying this and not me. I just want us to all be clear on who is bringing up the unit in this moment.
That nickname could have been based on something else entirely, but it was based on height and how big Randy Johnson was. And he is big. Like, that's the first thing you think when you see Randy Johnson. That guy's huge. That guy's so tall.
Yeah. There's no mistaking Randy Johnson at baggage claim.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Cal could blend in with a crowd more. And maybe it's just a butt versus being 6'10". It's just, a little less noticeable just in general.
The culture was not ready for Jorge Alfaro, right? Like, as much as Jason Parks and was
a legend
writing it right. It was not just about Jorge Alfaro's tools, although it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you hear stories about baseball players and big units that pertain to different units.
Once again, not me bringing this up.
Jorge Alfaro had a hose in all the ways it was possible to. And some of it is the culture evolving around the player, because like lots of baseball players have had big keisters.
Yes.
Including Anthony Recker.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whose butt got big later. Like, Anthony Recker went to my high school. My little, 125 people in a class, public high school, Catasauqua, Pennsylvania. Like, Anthony Recker's one of the couple of pro athletes to come from there, and was in high school when I was in middle school.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. When Buck Showalter closes his eyes, like visions of Anthony Recker's butt dance in his mind's eye, basically.
But so many dudes, but some of it is just like, now you're right. We celebrate it now, and it's just is a thing that has evolved, I think, around the player. But I kind of do agree with Sam that, like, proportion to the rest of Cal's body.
Sure.
He's just large all over. Yeah.
He's proportionate, but I think that if you are to, if you had a line of men, and and I'm not saying they have to have their pants off. Their pants can be on. That's the thing about the butt. You don't need a pants off situation to do this kind of check. If there's a line of men and they are standing there, and you are comparing the size of their butts relative to one another, I imagine you're looking at Cal and going, that's a 90th percentile butt, you know? And it is proportional. So you're right. It's not like he's like a Lewis Carroll character or something, but like, he's big dumper. He's got a big dumper.
Yeah. I'm not a big dumper truther. Just, there's some merit to what Sam was saying, I think.
I'll allow it.
Sir Mix-a-Lot was ahead of the culture, and we've all just kind of caught up.
So appropriate that he came. He went to my high school.
Wow.
My Instagram reels tell me, like, do 20 squats, and Cal Raleigh squats for 3 hours. You want to live a long life? Just do 20 body squats like this every day. And it's like, this guy is doing it hundreds and hundreds of times. Like, of course it's going to be like this.
Before we get to the draft, just a couple quick other items. Meg, I mentioned last time with Davey, your selfie with Blooper in the background. I'm relieved to hear that you survived this encounter, so you were in close proximity to Blooper.
Like
Don't know if you had any direct interaction, but
no.
I assume that up close and personal was not any less disconcerting.
No. And there was a moment later in the draft, and this could serve as transition if we wanted it to. Famously, next year's All-Star Game draft, Futures Game, etc., will be in Philly. And so toward the end of the draft, there was a moment where Blooper and the Fanatic took the stage together, and Blooper handed the Fanatic a bat as if to pass the baton to the next mascot whose home city will serve as a venue for the draft. And I was sitting there hoping that the Fanatic would beat him to death, and was disappointed that he did not. I was like, look.
Strangles him to death with his tongue?
Yeah, or something.
Blunt force trauma from a belly bash.
He's just not, it's not good. It remains unnatural. He remains a fleshy monstrosity. We were in sort of prime mascot territory. Mrs. Met came and flirted with me at the beginning, but I was very occupied getting the mock out, and so I was not able to flirt back. And I feel badly because I was able to observe up close and personal the interaction between Mrs. Met and Mr. Met. And I don't know if it was his fall from the stage at a Lumineers concert, but the love seems to be out of the marriage. And so I think that if I had wanted to, I could be Mrs. Met's very special friend. So that felt like a missed opportunity. The Moose was there. The Moose remains a personal fave, but not because he is objectively a great mascot, but because he is my favorite teams. I think that Billy the Marlin is a hazard. I don't understand why they were like, let's do hard plastic, pointy nose. This seems smart. All it takes is somebody not paying attention. They're going to lose an eye. I was like, I've given the Mariners guff for their trident. This is way more dangerous. What other mascot thoughts did I have? There were mascot security people, and one of the mascot security people was a gal. Handlers. She was in a t-shirt that said mascot security, and she was wearing aviators inside. And I was like, is she doing a bit? Like, is she trying to look like she's like Secret Service?
She had Roll Tide gear.
No, it was Braves gear. I was wrong. It was the A. It
was the Braves A, so she's Blooper's handler.
Yeah,
so she's scarred.
Yeah, I'm betraying my status as a coastal elite that I could not distinguish those A's from one another. It's my bad, and I do feel badly about it. I feel bad about it.
Blooper looks like a car that you get it and you're like, oh, the air in the city I live in is too dirty to have a white car.
Yes.
That's what the mascot, skin, whatever fur looks like on him.
Yeah.
It's not good.
After snow falls in the city.
Yes.
And it's all, there's like a crust of darkened snow on top, and it's kind of gross. Yeah. It's tough to come back from Mr. Met's indignity at that Lumineers concert, which is one of the funniest highlights I've seen, or bloopers. I guess it is a blooper, not to invoke Blooper again, but if you haven't seen that, anyone listening,
it's a
you owe it to
bleeper
yourself. It is. Yeah. He's at a Lumineers concert. They toss him a tambourine. He fails to catch it, which is understandable. I'm sure it's like restricted visibility in there with a big baseball head. And then he recovers from that and is confidently striding elsewhere on the stage. And there's like a juncture in the stage where it goes out into the crowd. He just walks right off. And just an inadvertent crowd surf where there is no crowd, and then just pops back up again. One of the best. Okay. Yeah, I hope he's okay as well. But the mascot costume probably provides ample cushioning. Obviously, his head is well cushioned, I would think.
Now that he's got the fake guns, I think you're probably right.
True.
He's like jacked under there. It's weird.
The other thing that I talked to Davey about in an effort to forestall further emails was just about the Jack Caglione Vinny Pasquantino kisses, which we received many a message about, and you probably received more than I did.
So many.
Yeah,
so many.
Just wanted to, as they say in the Bear, herd, just like we got that.
Yeah.
Wanted to head off further emails at the pass. But if you did have any thoughts on that, obviously, the Italian-American connection. The kissing if they want to, which in this case, clearly they do. And
clearly they did.
And we've talked about, there have been other instances of this. There's been lots of Minnesota twins smooching, and, lots
As opposed
of like
to twins smooching, which could get into very dicey territory very quickly.
Lots of pecks on the cheek, almost European.
Yeah.
Lots of top of the head kissing.
Oh yeah, that's so nice.
We're not seeing like full on mouth to mouth here, which
is fine.
When you say only if they want to, I don't know whether that's within the realm of what you're talking about or hoping for or advocating. But we haven't really seen teams cross that frontier so much. But
no.
But what Jack and Vinny have been doing, it's nice. It goes to show that rookies, they don't get hazed as much anymore. They're
Yes.
embraced. They're encouraged
Yes.
by the.
How about that?
Not
Yeah.
that Vinny's like an old seasoned veteran or something, but he's been around a little bit, and obviously a character, very good
Yes.
on Twitter, like our boy Brent Rooker, and just fun to see them embrace and share that connection.
I just like there being a variety of positive, tender, friendly affirmations that can exist between people. And I think that quite often men are discouraged from engaging in those. And that's a bummer. And a lot of the expressions of excitement that we see on the baseball field, I think from pro athletes generally, and I will say this does seem to cut across gender, so it's not purely a gender thing, but a lot of it is like, you're doing the yell, and you're like, ah, and you're so excited. And I'm happy that they're so excited, but I just think that humans contain so many different shades of emotion, and it's nice for there to be ones that are about seeming happiness, tenderness, affection. It just is good to tell the people in your life who you love that you love them. Give them a little peck if that's what you want to do. And so I just think it's a nice thing, and it can take on whatever shape feels best to them. But I'm glad that that more forms of that kind of affection are being given expression. I think that's good. Yeah.
I also think it's like you cannot be more secure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like as dudes, but I do, as a certain someone gets closer and closer to, deeper into their Arby years, there might be a Michael and Fredo thing happening because certain someones both play first base.
Oh,
Drama.
Oh, wow. Huh.
So I'm just saying, don't get too attached to Tweak and Craig.
The love affair will curdle.
Going to be drinking daiquiris in Cuba, and then it's going to really go south.
Yeah. Last thing is that gotta shout out Joe Sheehan and his excellent newsletter at joesheehan.com, because he provided further fodder for my "it's not a half of the season" crusade, which probably pretty tiresome. I understand that, but he provided data. He brought data.
Yes.
This is not pure pedantry. I mean, it is. But it's
to be clear,
objectively based pedantry, because Joe argued that the All-Star break is too late. Whether you think it's too late or not, it is inarguably later than it used to be in terms of the percentage of the season played. It's more or less when it was always played, but it's settled in as the second or third week of July now. And the start of the season has moved up, and not just with a few international games, but seasons start in March now, and they used to start typically in mid-April for a long time, or at least like first week of April. And so the start date keeps moving up to accommodate expanded playoffs and more playoff rounds. You either have to go later, which they've done sometimes, or start earlier, or both, and you're contending with potentially bad weather on either end. And so if you keep the All-Star game in the same spot, more or less, in July, and you move up the start of the season, well, then a higher percentage of the season will have been played by the All-Star break. And that is exactly what Joe showed. And so this year, we're at 59.5% of the season has been completed. Last season, it was 59.7%. There was only one prior year, a little bit of an outlier. In 1973, it was 60%. But most of the time, like this year and last year, are the second and third highest percentages of the season completed by the All-Star break. And for many years, it was 50-50. It was actually a half. And so, like, I'm fine with the origin of saying first half, second half. It was accurate at one time. Like in 1990, it was 50.6% of the regular season was completed by the All-Star break. 1991, 49.8%. Even I am not pedantic enough to complain about calling it first, second half when it's that close to 50-50. But now it's 60-40. That's just not a half. It's just not. Yeah. And this, I think, has implications. Now, Joe is arguing that it's worse for the rhythm of the season. That one reason why you have an All-Star break is actually to give guys a break so that they can rest and recuperate. And so if you're going deeper into the season, then maybe that's not good. Granted, I guess the playoffs go deeper into October and even November sometimes. And so maybe for some players, it ends up being roughly the same percentage. But for most, maybe they're getting gassed before the break. Plus, it distorts all the fun facts because there's so many fun facts about like most X before, in the first half, before the All-Star break, whatever it is. And it's just a totally different percentage of the season. And a lot of people still do the mental math of like, okay, you have X wins at the All-Star break. We can just double that. That's what you're on pace for. Or you've hit X home runs by the All-Star break. Double that. That's what you're on pace for. And now that's not even close to true. Unfortunately, we have FanGraphs and its on-pace projections page to correct these misperceptions. But just saying, it's not a half. It's further from being a half than it's ever been. And we got an email from valued, treasured Patreon supporter Peter, who wanted to out pedant me. And I mean, if you're going to try to go toe to toe with me when it comes to a pedantry competition, you better be prepared. And Peter, I think, came in and thought he had his trump card. And he said, I come to be pedantic about Ben's pedantry. My take, it's fine to refer to the post All-Star break as the second half of the season. Why? Because in all sorts of media, the halves are unequal. The second half of most plays are often shorter. The same with movies that include intermissions, and often books too. If you were watching The Brutalist, for example, and whispered before the intermission that the second half starts now, I'd consider you a crazy person. Just because the second half isn't at the 50% mark doesn't mean that the break plays a big role. I reject the premise of this argument because I wouldn't call any of those things halves either. I would refer to a second act of a play. If it's not in the middle of the play, I'd call it a second act, a second part, a second section, a second chapter. A half is a half. I mean, I guess like there's one definition by which maybe it makes sense. Like if you say that, you have two things, you have two sections. And so one of the two is half of the things. You have two things. One of the things is half of the things.
Right.
But I think we're talking about a percentage of the whole, not a percentage of the number of subsections. It's like when people joke about, oh, you have a 50-50 shot of being right or wrong or whatever. It's like it's going to be one or the other, right? It's going to be true or false or whatever it is. And so there are only two options for responses. So you got a 50% chance of being right, but not really. Everyone knows that's kind of tongue in cheek and you don't actually. So that's what I'm saying. Just thanks to Joe, my campaign continues.
I sometimes complain about nitpicky emails that we get of my, verbal tics or personhood, and I'm gaining insight into the environment we've created that maybe facilitates those being sent. Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah. If your expectations are, I'm trying to think of a possible solution for this, and it is really difficult. Like there are too many cuts of meat, or you pull like Twinkies apart or whatever, and a certain chunk of Twinkie is left onto the one, like, or you separate an Oreo and the frosting goes on one side.
Yeah, we had a Patreon supporter named Mac who suggested calling the post All-Star break portion of the season the back nine because it's like 9/20ths of the season remaining, kind of. But I thought that would probably still be kind of confusing.
I think that's kind of confusing.
Yeah, because, in golf, the back nine, it's still half of the holes. And so I think most people would think of it as synonymous with the golf meaning where it is half, and then we're right back at second half. But I do appreciate the attempt.
I would like the All-Star break to be whenever it is the nicest in the place they want to have it.
Oh, my amen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Within a window, a reasonable window, but if you want to have a May 30th start to your All-Star weekend, if it means putting it here or like in Texas or something where it's like nicer than it is. Like, you don't want to have an All-Star weekend in Phoenix and it's 117 every day. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do that. And I would imagine with like the stadium getting renovated, that Arizona will get one again in the next decade. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like you can't do that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Joe just suggested a week earlier it wouldn't be out of line with where it's been historically. It would still be, I guess, more than 50%, but close enough that I wouldn't make as much of a stink about it, probably. So
probably.
Yeah. Anyway, the Olympics are coming up in a few years, and that's going to disrupt things. And maybe like the Olympic, if that's going to be like July 15th to 20th, maybe that ends up with the break being moved earlier to be in advance of the Olympics. I don't know. Or maybe it replaces the All-Star break, which I'm sure MLB doesn't want because less revenue. Anyway, let's proceed to the second half of this podcast, the second act, at least, of this podcast. And we'll talk about the draft. And if you want to give any future game in-person looks or anything like that, feel free. But yeah, maybe we could do a kind of condensed version of the draft digest that we usually do on this podcast. But we could maybe start at the top, I guess, because that was, I mean, you tell me, but it didn't seem like there was a clear consensus, no doubt, number one. And then everyone learned that Reggie Willits has a son who is of age to be drafted by a major league team. Barely, to be fair, 17-year-old Eli Willits, who is, I guess, the youngest draftee ever, or since Ken Griffey Jr. It's been a long time. And I guess all else being equal, the younger the better for a draftee. But is all else equal? Like, did this make sense? Do you think this was disrupted at all by the disruption in the Nationals front office? Were there designs on moves later in the draft that made sense? Or are you as high on Willits as the Nationals are? And does he have more power than his dad, which would be hard not to have, I guess. I remember Reggie Willits fondly. That 1 year he had, at least, like, he was fun for a little while, just speedster, slap hitter, but not the type of profile that would go 1-1. So I'm guessing that Eli's a little different. He's a shortstop for one. I mean, I guess what draftee who's 17 and is taken at the top of the draft is not a shortstop in high school, I guess, but still.
I think some of the like dynamics of the progeny part of it are really fascinating now that I've been doing this long enough for there to have been so many young players whose fathers were big leaguers or ex-athletes of some kind. And like, look, Eli Willits, he's 17 and a half. I don't know that he's one of the youngest draftees ever or since a certain time. That might be true. It does feel we've had a number of reclassifications over the last decade or so where players move from one draft class to the other, like they accelerate their academic calendar and graduate or get their GED, or the homeschooling laws in their state are loose or whatever it is, and they graduate high school a year early. And I think as parents, especially baseball parents, have become hip to the idea that teams operate in a more model-driven way, at least a greater percentage of the teams do, care about the age of high school players, terrified of 19-year-old high school players, more intrigued by the idea of 17-year-old high school players just because of historical precedent. I think there's less signal in some of that stuff when part of the reason Ken Griffey Jr. is drafted at the age he is, with the sort of confidence that he's drafted, that he was, is because of how special he was. Like, it wasn't just that he's 17 when he's drafted that made Ken Griffey Jr. good. So I do think that some of the behavior of all the stakeholders, both the teams and now like baseball parents, like there's less signal in some of this stuff. But I do think Eli Willits is a really good player. And I do think that there is a greater error bar in terms of projecting him as an athlete in like a physical sense, because he is 17 and a half years old and Billy Carlson is 19. And that's at this age, as I'm sure we've talked about on this show, 18 months is a big deal for physical development, social development. Like, we're just young people. So Eli Willits does everything else. He's an excellent shortstop defender. He's a great contact hitter, and he is not built like 17-year-old Ellie De La Cruz or Fernando Tatis Jr. And so it's not like obvious that at 23 he's going to have that kind of power and physicality or build or anything like that. And it's just sort of going to be up to him how strong he gets. And there are plenty of athletes who are like Eli Willits and enter their physical prime, like having done hard work and like been on good strength and conditioning programs because the personnel that their organization employs in those spaces are like, they really know what they're doing. And so, yeah, like he could be very good. Part of the Nationals' motivation was, the financial part of this, the strategic drafting part of this, that they had a number of players in mind at the top of the draft. As, the draft approached, like we're talking the hours leading up to the draft, as I'm like finishing my mock and working on this stuff and seeing, trying to sift through BS and what is real, it did seem true that they were exploring Willits, Holiday, and Cade Anderson, and whichever of that group would take the least amount of money, they would do. Just condensing the negotiating period down to like that amount of time. And so just logically, because of like during the mock draft period of time, like once teams start getting into the room and meeting and the week and a half, 2 weeks before the draft, some more of this stuff starts to emerge. It did seem like the Rizzo stuff made it harder for people on the outside to have a feel for what was going on. And that maybe some of like the Scott Boras of it all, who represented Ethan Holiday, Cade Anderson, that was complicating things on this end too. If you're negotiating with individual players and they're separate from one another, like there's like a prisoner's dilemma almost that's created by this dynamic of having one agent representing multiple parties, and he gets to know what one of the other players' numbers, he knows what two of the three players' like numbers are basically. And so it just made it seem logical to me that it would be Willits who would take the least amount of money of that group. Now, what that allowed them to do is, I think if we're just doing the logical part of it here, Eli Willits' next home in the draft seemed like it was 5 to St. Louis, and slot at 5 is $8 million. And so, the slot at 1 is $11 million. And so if you can offer Eli Willits $8.1 million to be the first pick in the draft, he has incentive to say, yes, I'll do that. But if Cade Anderson and Ethan Holiday might go 2, 3, 4, they don't necessarily have the incentive to do it, or for not as much anyway, right? So the Nationals have other high school players later in this class: Landon Harmon, who they took in the 3rd round, Miguel Samay in the 4th round. They're hard-throwing high school pitchers. Landon Harmon, I really, really like. I had him just like pure ranking-wise towards the back of the 1st round. Miguel Samay is a high school player from New York who, is more likely a reliever, but he's like a high school kid who throws 100. And, sometimes these guys become Harlan Susana or whatever. Like, he is freaky in this way, and we'll just see how it goes. He sure looks like a reliever now, but he's a high school kid. He's, 6'4", 240-pound high school kid from New York. And so who knows, what he might be. And then Coy James, who they took in the 5th round. Like, now we're talking about taking, 7-figure high school players deep in the draft because of what they were able to execute at the very top of the draft, cutting an underslot deal with Eli Willits, and then probably, I would guess, an underslot deal in the 2nd round with Ethan Petrie, the power hitting, realistically like first base DH type guy from South Carolina, a college player. In a relatively short amount of time, that this new Nationals leadership, it's not really like it was a pretty seamless transition. Like, you have an interim person who's been there. There are people in the industry who are just like not sure who's making the pick or the picks plural. And so I think we're still sussing that stuff out, but they had continuity. It is mostly the scouting director and cross-checkers who are like running the bulk of your draft. No doubt when you're picking first, like Mike Rizzo would have been involved in that decision-making process. And then suddenly wasn't. So there's a change. But really, they mostly just had continuity, and I think it was fine. But I thought they did pretty well. I really like a lot of the players they took. There are high upside high school players in this class, and a lot of the teams who I would class. It's interesting because the Nationals, who you might consider, at least under Rizzo, to have been like on the old school side of the continuum, just because of like Rizzo, and not that they're like an ignorant franchise, but just that like the person in charge is more that way. They in this draft employed a strategy that like the Milwaukee Brewers, who I think we would all say is like on the other end of like the highly analytical and like decision-making processes are this and that particular way end of the spectrum, like did this thing again that we've talked about for the last several years, where their class includes how many this year? Like well over half a dozen high school players, because they're cutting deals and they're having like a go wide style draft class on high schoolers, and like using more of the draft, like using more of the space that 20 rounds of a draft affords you to try to deploy this strategy, while other teams, their money is spent down to the penny by the end of round 11. And then the rest of their draft is organizational players, basically 125K bonuses and below. Players, maybe they've like left wiggle room to try to leverage, 25K here and there to get the players they want, who they know have agents. We'll give you 150K to come here rather than be the 15th rounder at 125K somewhere else. But like mostly teams are kind of done. And so for some of these teams like Milwaukee to structure their first 10 rounds such that they still have money to throw around on day 2 and be able to do it when the draft is a day shorter, like just the logistics of time, when rather than have 20 rounds spread across 3 days and in between day 1 and 2 have time to strategize, in between day 2 and 3 have time to do accounting for how much bonus pool you've spent, and then re-strategize and be like, okay, like what players do we like who are out there who are signable for the amount of money that we think we have left, and like let's call their agents and see, if that's still their number and that kind of stuff. Like what are the medicals on those 5 players? And all of that was condensed down to like an hour's worth of time. And so the amount of preparation, right? Because rather than the day 2 end after round 10 and then the next 10 rounds are day 3, you had an hour between round 10 and 11. And so, just what must have been going on in the draft rooms at those times, just to, and the preparation to be on point and have your ducks in a row so that you weren't scrambling during that time frame and like knew what you could possibly do. Yeah, like this is the nitty gritty stuff that like has nothing to do with anyone's like 30-yard dash time. Yeah. But like is really important. And you can definitely see some of these teams like leveraging that is a difficult thing and operating in this way that is novel relative to the most of the rest of the league. They are like done drafting this entire, you just have your pick of every high school player for the last 10 rounds because you're one of the only couple of teams who has like budgeted to give a bunch of them in the mid 6 figures. And they'll not even know, like the Brewers don't know which of these guys they are actually going to sign. Some of them they won't, like some of them are contingencies.
Right.
They're still negotiating with these players and try to fit as many of them into their bonus pool as they can.
Yeah. Speaking of that compression, that's another, I guess, reason to maybe move the All-Star game a little earlier if you insist on packaging the All-Star break and the draft, which I know is controversial with a lot of teams because
it's not controversial. They all hate it.
Yeah. Okay. They all hate it. Let's
it's true.
State that plainly.
Strong consensus.
Yeah. So another reason why having the All-Star break this late, and of course you don't have to have the draft and the All-Star game at the same time. It didn't used to be, but if you are going to insist on doing that, then the All-Star break coming as late as it does in close proximity to the trade deadline, where you have people who are trying to prep for the draft and the deadline at the same time, just another pile up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've made the degree of difficulty like PG National for 2026 class, this enormous week-long showcase. It's grueling. It's in Phoenix. It's 110 degrees every day. And you're watching baseball for 12 hours a day. And it's all during the window of time right before the draft when theoretically you should be doing everything I just said. And some scouts are just left out of draft rooms entirely because they've already started on 2026. People are on the Cape. And some of the prospects for like some of the weird knock-on effects of this stuff being as late as it has been after the pandemic is if you're JT Quinn or if you're Nick Nastrini, you go to the Cape after the college season to rebuild your stock or whatever.
Yeah.
Or if you're a player who's interesting but didn't have a great spring or you were hurt or whatever it is, now the draft is late enough that you can go to the Cape and show scouts. I was watching a guy in the lead up to the draft working on updates. His name is JT Quinn. Quinn was the Orioles comp pick like after the second round. And he went to Georgia, and he was okay, but it was one of those situations where why not show that you're healthy and throwing hard on the Cape? And so I put on the tape, and like, there's the Yankees scouting director, and it's like July 1st. And like, you know, right behind home plate, like in clear view is like 4 people who I recognize. So yeah, it's definitely a strange thing, but that's, you know, it's good for JT Quinn to be able to have that opportunity to show that while people just like catch it and they're just like, oh yeah, this guy he's throwing 95. Like, good, I know that about him. Whereas it's been since, you know, May when I saw the guy whose team didn't even make the conference playoffs or whatever.
So given that sort of strange environment, both generally and then this year with we should be clear, the same number of rounds occurred, but they just happened over 2 days rather than 3, which is what is typical. And good luck to both of us remembering whether to say day 2 or day 3 for any of these guys in their reports next year.
That's right, yeah.
Yep. Good luck to all of us on that. And by us, I mean me mostly. I'm curious, you know, I know that we can't grade a draft class certainly not a couple of days after it's come together. A lot of these guys have not signed yet, so we don't know what the class for each of these teams is even necessarily going to be. But who struck you as the draft is concluded here as having a particularly good couple of days? Which were the teams whose classes sort of excited you the most in terms of their prospect potential?
Yeah, I thought I liked the player pool in this draft class in general. And so there were a lot of teams whose like hauls, I was just like, I sit back and go like, this is a nice little cluster of dudes like to add into their farm system. I thought Pittsburgh did well. Pittsburgh and I, as far as draft stuff, like often mesh pretty well. They got 3 of my top 30 players. The one guy who I was like, sort of the black sheep on from those 3 was Murph Gray, the third baseman at Fresno State, who's just sort of like physically freaky, big, powerful guy. Third base, like 6'5", 240 type of dude who really overhauled his swing this year. Much more pull-oriented, like my notes as far as what was happening with like the nature of his contact from the offseason to now. Like we're totally different, 2024 and 2025, and performed, amid the swing change, and is, like a maybe third baseman where it's just size-wise you don't know, but athletically and arm strength-wise it's like yes. So the thing that is tough about him is, tough to sort of nail down is he beat up on small conference pitching. The data, against small conference pitching is great. I think he's, like an 89% zone contact guy who's, 6'4", pull power. Like I really liked him, but there is just this delta on how do you project this guy's hit tool when he's facing dudes who throw like 88, 91 every weekend, like the Friday night starter at some of these like mid-major schools is a dude with a good breaking ball who like sits 90. So it's tough to nail that down. But the other guys, Seth Hernandez, who they took 6th overall, he's in that pantheon of like, is this the best high school pitcher I've ever seen? Like, you see him on the right day and that's what it looks like. It looks like, Hunter Green. It looks like Dylan Lesko. It looks like Josh Beckett. It's that type of thing where, he's overpowering really good high school hitters. In Hernandez's case, there are times when the strikes aren't there, when his fastball location is just like loose in the zone, and you see that the shape of his fastball doesn't quite play to the level of his velocity, like Roki Sasaki type stuff where you go, that's like 98, but everyone's hitting it or at least fouling it off. What's going on with that? We should probably know about that before we take a guy in the top, 3 or 5 or whatever. And what we're going to do about that. We should have some preconceived notions about what we're going to do. But just like crazy athlete, 2-way high school player, a first baseman with power and amazing defense, and just like your prototypical top of the draft high school pitcher, the best high school changeup you've ever seen, or, certainly in that pantheon for me. And then Angel Cervantes, who they took 50th, he's a high school pitcher from California as well. This is, he's shy of 18, 6'3", 195-pound dude who last summer it was, hey, this guy's delivery's kind of a mess and he's like not in the best shape. And it was really if this player during the offseason changes his conditioning, then next spring he could absolutely be a first-round pick. And that's what happened. So, I imagine that he'll get overslot money at 50. He'll get something in like the $2.5 million range, I would guess. And I absolutely had him in that area. And then at pick 113, they took Gustavo Melendez, who was a Puerto Rican high school infielder, who was just like my type of player, where it's like he's 5'9", and actually he might not even be 5'9". I have him listed as 5'9". I think the East Coast Pro player guidebook that is sitting on Kylie's desk right now has him at 5'8". Really good athlete, just compact little guy, but is powerful for his size. Has some of the stuff happening with his swing that makes me believe this is a special athlete of some kind. Even though he's little, he's like not a shrimpy, small guy. He's short, but he's not small. And so I really like him too. Another one where he's 17 and a half. Now he's one of those players where if I'm in a draft room, I'm saying, hey, can you make the model not adjust him for his age? Because at 5'8", 175 pounds, he's not projectable in the way the model thinks a 17 and a half year old is projectable. Right. And wants to say, well, his future power will be this because it's this right now. It's no, this kid's mostly done growing, and any more than what he has would maybe start to be detrimental to his mobility, because he's already so physically strong for a 5'8" kid. He's built like a little wrestler. And so that's one where it's just make it to 18 and a half in the model, manually put it in there. But yeah, so I thought they had a good class. Baltimore had a really good class in part because they had a lot of picks, and they traded Brian Baker for a pick right before the draft and added an extra pick at the end. It was interesting. I thought, those two teams coming together for that particular deal is interesting for a number of reasons, because it kind of shows us the going rate for a pick like that, where it's Brian Baker's a good middle reliever. And the 37th, I think most, I don't think a person who's thinking about baseball at all this way could be described as casual, but I think most people, if you told them, pick a player on every team who you think is worth a late first round, early second round pick, basically, they would shoot for higher than solid middle reliever. And so I think that kind of speaks to anytime there's a 1-for-1. Alex Claudio got traded for the 41st overall pick at 1.2. Yeah. This is just sort of the going rate for a pick around this area is middle reliever. So that's a thing to keep in mind. Baltimore, yeah, a lot of different picks. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 picks in the top 100. So, I thought that they got a lot of good players. Ike Irish fell on draft night because, well, first of all, it's an interesting story that as this transpired, people didn't know what was going on. That, people expected Irish would go somewhere in the 2 to 7, maybe 9 range. And then he didn't go. And at the very beginning of the draft, so I'm sitting there and 10 minutes before the draft, I'm sitting there and I learn that it's going to be Willits. And then it becomes trying to figure out who would go in the next couple. And as rumors of that, I'm texting people in draft rooms who are in the top 10 because they want to know too. And Anaheim has been very quiet, except that people are just they're going to do what they do and take a college pitcher who they're going to put in the big leagues very quickly. Yeah. And I had multiple people text me, hey, we hear Ike Irish is going too. I don't know how that happened, and it's possible that one person got bad information because as the night
And then
transpired,
spread it to everyone else.
yes, like there were times the other night when I'm pretty sure, like anytime I heard one thing from a particular two people, I just counted it as it being the same person. You know what I mean? Like, it seemed clear that they were communicating with each other, and if one of them heard it from the other, like that they were telling each other and then me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
any information, they were sharing information and then sharing it with me. So I just counted it as one person the whole night. But anyway, that's, I think, what happened with this Irish situation, and that maybe someone just got bad dope in the moment. But then they took Tyler Bremner, and it was a surprise, not because Bremner's not talented, like he is, but there just wasn't any real connection with those two. And I think you could tell Bremner, like on the broadcast, was also very surprised. There was some Bremner smoke at 3, but that was like if the Mariners do the sort of thing that they've done in recent drafts where they cut a big deal and then get like a bunch of high, bonus high schoolers, that Bremner was the guy who they would do that with at 3. But then the Ike Irish stuff starts to unfold, and I have teams now like in the middle third and back third of the draft asking like, what's going on with this? And these are people who did not think that Ike Irish had any chance of sniffing their pick. And so they have not had reason to do the same kind of makeup work on a player like Ike Irish as someone who you think maybe you do want to, like, will be there at your pick. And so they're all scrambling to try to find out, like, did this guy flunk someone's medical, a bunch of teams' medicals, but not ours? Or like, what happened here? And so like people are efforting to find out, and they, are telling me that there's like video circulating of like him saying like hateful, bigoted stuff. And so I haven't seen the video, but like teams like were scared enough of it that they passed, or were like at least trying to find out and didn't know and weren't comfortable or whatever it is. And then there was someone sitting right next to Meg and I at the draft who was like, some of this is also just like, people don't think he can catch, and his splits against velocity are bad. Right. Like, not everyone necessarily was out like because they knew this.
Or concerned about a video they haven't seen.
They like had Ike Irish further down their board and just took the player that they had at the top without thinking about like Ike Irish at all. But it did seem that this happened, and that was part of the reason he fell. And like, as far as Baltimore is concerned, it is a pretty buttoned up room in general, and I have no idea. And they have plausible deniability about not knowing about it, because the notion that he would have been there, and the idea that they could have found out like before they picked, like, you want to find out before you pick so that you're not having to deal with the possibility of like someone like me saying something like this on a podcast, I guess. But it's tough because everyone else is on TV. So it's like no one else in the moment really can sit there and try to figure out what's going on because they're all on TV.
Yeah, that's your competitive advantage, not being on TV, I guess.
To some extent, it's my competitive advantage, and to another extent, it's like my Eli Willits cross to bear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did want to ask you about Ethan Holiday, who was at one point thought to be a possible number 1 Mike Rizzo pick. He ends up going to the Rockies at number 4, so you have a Holiday family connection there. And with anyone else, if it were someone who were less highly touted, I'd think, oh, it's the Rockies-ing because they just wanted another Holiday or something. But obviously he's a top talent, and you had him number 3 on your mock going to the Mariners, but then the Mariners took your number 4, Kate Anderson, and so Holiday went to the Rockies. So just because people know that there's another Holiday, how does this Holiday compare to the 2 previous Holidays? And should we think any differently of the Rockies for having gone to the Holiday well once more?
Ethan Holiday's tough because he does emphatically check, the box of, in the scouting manifesto, underlined rule number 1 is bet on freaks. He's got just so much left-handed power, and I don't know, it's just crazy. Like, he swings so hard, you guys. And the thing is, like, he didn't really perform on the high school showcase circuit in a way that would truly indicate and make one comfortable that it is a slam dunk, no doubt thing. People should not spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, on like one of one Ethan Holiday, Bowman Chrome. Like, please don't. This guy slugged under 400 in a big sample on the showcase circuit, because as big as his power is, it did not play in games on the showcase circuit in the way that like you wanted it to. It was surprising for me too. Like, like he has some of the Drew Jones markers where he can't turn on fastballs at all. This type of stuff where in high school, if it's happening, then in pro ball, you don't really know how it's going to go. It might be a thing that requires a substantial adjustment to try to fix, and you might not be able to do it. Now, in Drew Jones's case, he does not have this kind of power. He does not have this kind of like physical strength. Drew Jones is one of those players who just really hasn't gotten a whole lot stronger. Like, his body just isn't, I don't know, like how much I'm sure he's worked at it. Like, in the Diamondbacks made Corbin Carroll as strong as he is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's not,
right.
I don't think it's that issue. I just think it's like Drew can't get strong in that way. And Ethan Holiday is already like way, way that strong at his age in like a big league, in a way that would stand out on a big league field already. I hope that he and the Rockies and presumably his dad can find a thing that works for him. But like, this is one of the same sort of thing that like, hey, Zach Veen isn't pulling any of these fastballs.
Right.
What's up with that? Like, Rockies fans should be intimately familiar with this dynamic where, boy, this guy's tools sure are big, but he really can't do anything with the elevated fastballs. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to see how that goes for Ethan. There has to be some sort of adjustment here, and the Rockies have not really been able to make their players better. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be interesting.
Just wanted to get your quick take on one other physical outlier here. You were talking about a littler player who was solidly built. This is the opposite of that. Jason Wrights.
Oh my gosh.
I got to ask you about Jason Wrights, who was the Twins' 4th round pick, 119 overall. He's a 20-year-old junior, or about to be 21, out of Oregon. And we talked about the big unit. This is the bigger unit. He's 6'11", 215 is the listed weight. And so he looks so elongated. He looks like the Savannah Bananas guy on stilts, essentially. And, he's a pitcher, obviously. So, and I guess he's exactly what you would expect for just a giant like that, like, long levers and hard to repeat the delivery, many moving parts, and command can be an issue, et cetera. But man, like, I saw a photo of him and I was just like, wow, there are not a lot of basketball, or not a lot of Freudian slip there, because there are some basketball players who look like that. There are not a lot of baseball players who do.
But he looks more like Wemby than he looks like a baseball player.
Yes.
Like, it's
yeah, it kind of broke my brain a little bit.
Yeah.
He's good. The Twins traffic in big pitchers like this, like the Bailey Obers of the world and stuff. Like, I think they have plenty of comfort and history with developing guys like this who exceed our expectations. I think, this is one of those guys when he goes, it's like, oh, of course, like, this guy should have been on my top 150. Like, I feel pretty good about Jason Wrights being a big leaguer. It's not that bad, Ben. Like, the strikes, it's not terrible for a 6'11" guy who's sitting, 91, 95, basically. It's like 60% fastball strikes. And the thing that the Twins have to reckon with is like below average fastball playability. Like, his size is helping how much depth is on his secondary stuff. Like just the dudes who are that big, the bigger you are, your stuff just starts downhill anyway. And then when your slider starts its break or your changeup starts to sink or whatever it is, it just accelerates the rate at which it is sinking. It just gives it like more room and time to do its movement because your release point has started from higher above the ground. There's just more room for it to break down and down and down. And so he benefits from that. And so like both of his secondary pitches, sliders like 84, 87, like it's not like a 79 mile an hour curveball. Like he's throwing a hard slider. His changeup is hard too. Both of them, you know, we're north of 40% in terms of miss and 30% chase. And, you know, he's throwing all of them for strikes 60% or more of the time. Like it's starter traits. It's just like his fastball gets shelled and the Twins are gonna have to figure out a way to just be like, hey, so hold your fastball like this and release it like this. And now it sinks too. See, all right, good. Like go to St. Paul. See you in St. Paul in 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's going to be a big leaguer regardless of the league.
I think so.
Big, because he's big.
Yeah.
It's appropriate the Twins took him because he's two people stacked on top of.
Yeah.
There is one guy I want to ask you about before we go, and I would like to give you an opportunity to sing the ballad of Marcus Phillips, because this is a guy you were very excited about. He went to the Red Sox. You were pleased he went to a team that seems to have acumen for developing starting pitching. Tell us about Marcus Phillips.
I don't know. Marcus Phillips is a pitcher from Tennessee who just he's like looks like most big league starters do. He moves like most big league starters do. He throws really hard. He's another player where the shape of his fastball is not good for the way it plays. But I just think that the physical characteristics, teams can do so much with development that the physical characteristics are just mostly what I care about. Mm-hmm. And so, Brian Wu at one point was like, hey, that guy's built like a pitcher and moves like a pitcher, and he has a 7 ERA. And the Mariners were like, actually, we know how to mold athletes into good pitchers. And that is precisely the sort of thing that I think can be done with everybody on, whatever prospect list, basically. But I think Marcus Phillips is especially ripe for cogent development. I think, no offense, the University of Tennessee is a powerhouse in college baseball. It is the powerhouse in college baseball. And I know, LSU is right there too, I suppose. But in terms of, producing talent that Major League Baseball cares about, it is Tennessee that is king. Of course, LSU is actually champion. But but they don't develop pitchers, I don't think, to the degree to which they could. I think that they are a recruiting machine, but I think the Boston Red Sox are very good at developing pitchers. And, there have been times in the past where you like a player and then a team that is maybe not particularly good at developing players drafts the player that you really liked, and you go, oh, now I'm going to be wrong about the guy I liked. But for this one, I was like, oh, good. I put, you put your neck into the guillotine of public opinion with every individual player. All 1,500 players you write up over the course of 9 months, you're just sort of like at least making their mom angry sometimes. And understandably, you like to try to be right about whoever. So Colby Thomas, sorry, Colby Thomas's mom, but sorry. But yeah, Marcus Phillips, now that he's a Red Sox, it's like, okay, good. Maybe this will work out the way I'm envisioning it to, even if it's just like, hey, Michael Kopech. It's the same thing. I'm not disappointed in Michael Kopech. I think the fact that he has had the career that he's had, given some of the stuff he's had to overcome, is amazing. And some of it is just because he does move like that. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And Marcus Phillips is in that area. There's so many players. I thought it was a fun draft, and it could go on and on and on about dozens of players, but you might as well just read the however many 100,000 words it was.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing I want to ask you, I forwarded a study to you. I don't know if you've had time to read it because you've been busy, but there was a study last week at Down on the Farm, the Substack, by the Oyster Analytics guys, Maxfield Lane and Owen Riley. And they basically looked at where does it make sense to spend money on the amateur market, what's the most bang for your buck or what's most predictive. And we know that like there's a lot of noise in the draft. There's a lot of unpredictability and variation, but there's also some signal. There's a correlation between how high you're drafted and how good you are, or how big your bonus is and how good you are. But what they found is that on the international market, international amateurs, that's not the case, evidently, that according to their research, at least, there's just no correlation between the size of the bonus and that player's production down the road. And you and Kylie wrote a lot about the international market in Future Value, your book. And it's interesting because this is the time of year when in the past we would have been talking about J2 and, you know, the international market. Now it's moved. It's January and the signing period is different. So it's not as top of mind. But I was thinking about this because of the draft. And so their strategy, basically, they said what we would do is just like quantity over quality, basically. Like we wouldn't hand out the biggest bonus to anyone because it's just, you know, throwing darts, basically, and you just want as many, I'm mixing metaphors here, but as many lotto tickets as you can, essentially. Is that the way that you feel? Do you feel like the draft is just miles and away more predictive than, you know, because you're not an international scouting guy as much. Like you're not doing quite as many reports and everything on, you know, like the 16-year-old who's just eligible to sign now. And no wonder, like it makes sense that it'd be hard to project those guys because they're so young and there's so much more development and physical growth to happen. But I thought it was an interesting finding. Like it doesn't surprise me that there's not much signal there, but that there's not any, evidently, on the whole. That was kind of a revelation to me.
Yeah, I think there was a point where the bonus amounts still correlated. And then I think as the CBA changed and we got to the point where we are now where more and more often the teams are coming to verbal agreements with the players at younger and younger ages, that it is just inherently becoming more volatile. Mm-hmm. Like I would want to study it during the windows. But see, some of it, you can't just use the rules of the CBA, I suppose, as like the markers for like the eras of team behavior, because the agreements have been done, you know, years in advance, and so like there's sort of a blending that happens at the margins of it, or at least, you know, along the seams of it. But I do think the general trend at play here is coming to agreement with players earlier and earlier and earlier. It has crept over time as the current rules have been in place and seemingly stable for a while, you know, crept earlier and earlier and earlier. I don't know what a good solution is. It is an icky, bad thing. The people who tend to, and again, not necessarily get ahead because, as you said, like we're past the point of there being correlation between the bonus amounts and productivity. And for sure, there is at least like a half decade's worth of window, you know, like a star dying, you know, like as we're sitting here right now, the 2021 international class, like its pro outcomes have not even remotely come close to playing out. Neither has 22 or 23. Like the post-pandemic means for this market, we don't really know a whole lot about it just yet, but like it's gross, you know, when you have a deal with kid 4+ years out. And yeah, I think there's hubris involved. You just have no idea what's going to happen between now and then. And you're also a victim of like the observer effect to some point, because now the adolescent boy that you've promised millions of dollars to, like, can just, you know, how he handles that. How the hell do you have any idea how that's going to go?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I don't know what a solution is, because the draft, an international draft part of it is bad, like for other reasons, where the players lose their agency to some extent and where you're doubling the incentive to tank in a way. If we make the players wait longer to enter pro baseball than age 16, then you're also reducing, like you're doing the owners a favor down the line, because part of the reason Juan Soto hits free agency at the age he does is because he got into pro baseball at the age he did. And so, I'm sure the owners collectively would love for there to not be another Juan Soto contract among them. Mm-hmm. But and a way to help facilitate that is to make the international players wait to be drafted when they're 18 instead of, signing a pro contract at 16. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's a very complex issue. But generally, I think that agreeing to players more and more when they're so young, you're just like, you don't really know what they're going to be at that age. Plus it's gross. And some of the teams are benefiting from it. The teams who do go wide, and have a particular type of player who they target and with mid 6-figure deals. That's how Milwaukee got Jesus Mate and Luis Pena.
Yeah.
Well, it's the old adage, the William Goldman about movies, no one knows anything. I don't think that's quite true about baseball. People know some things, but no one knows everything. Eric Longenhagen knows more than most, which is why it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Shout out to Sean, listener, who sent us a question about the swing-off and the regular season. He said, would you be in favor of scrapping the extra inning rules for a swing-off style ending to games? No. To take this question up a notch, should we also scrap the records-based standings and move to a point-style table for divisions/leagues? Every win would be worth 3 points, no points for losses, 1 point for a game that ends in 9 innings and a tie, and 1 point if your team wins the swing-off. How exciting would it be to be the home team fan in the bottom of the ninth, having your team down a few runs, knowing that if your team ties it, they win the division? Sort of a hockey-style solution. I definitely don't hate it if you implement ties. I can live with ties. With all these other extra innings gimmicks in the regular season, there's kind of a Calvin ball aspect to the ending. With ties, there's just an ending. But as long as the game's going on, it's played the same way. And we can keep podcasting the same way thanks to the largesse of our Patreon supporters. If you want to support Effectively Wild, and we want you to want to, you can go to patreon.com/effectivelywild and sign up to pledge some monthly or yearly amount to help keep the podcast going, help us stay ad-free, and get yourself access to some perks, as have the following 5 listeners: Chiron Zawadny, Anna Chen, Derek Shin, David Bowman, and Ben Odell. Thanks to all of you. Patreon perks include access to the Effectively Wild Discord group for patrons only, monthly bonus episodes, playoff live streams, personalized messages, prioritized email answers, discounts on merch and ad-free FanGraphs memberships, and so much more. Check out all the offerings at patreon.com/effectivelywild. If you are a Patreon supporter, you can message us through the Patreon site. If not, you can contact us via email. Send your questions, comments, intro and outro themes to podcast@fangraphs.com. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Effectively Wild on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other podcast platforms. We do appreciate your positive reviews. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/effectivelywild. You can find the Effectively Wild subreddit at r/effectivelywild. And you can check the show notes at FanGraphs or the episode description in your podcast app for links to the stories and stats we cited today. Thanks to Shane McKeon for his editing and production assistance. We'll be back with one more episode before the end of the week. We will talk to you soon.
Effectively Wild, where we can talk about Tony all day long. Effectively Wild, Ben and Meg on a mic, you know it's gonna be a good time. I wanna learn about new statistics. I wanna hear about none of them RBIs, yeah. Tell me about some prospect